Today we are really gathered here to remember and honor our common Guruji, one of the greatest teachers and scholars in Indian geosciences, Professor S.N. Rajaguru. I welcome on behalf of the Sharma Centre for Heritage Education, Dr. Kumar Akhilesh, Dr. Prachi Joshi, Shutonuka Bhattacharya, and myself. We welcome all of you today and we'll be hosting this memorial. We are honored today also to be joined by family members, Mr. and Mrs. Rajguru and his granddaughter Miss Vaidehi Rajguru, as also by many of his former colleagues and students past and present across several generations, amongst others from various disciplines. Today's program will begin with the Professor S.N. Rajaguru Memorial Geoarchaeology Lecture, the first one of which will be delivered by Professor Sheila Mishra. Following this, we will announce an award which we have instituted in his honor, and the awardee is present in this meeting. And subsequently, we will have a lot of thoughts, memories, and discussions about our common great teacher and former colleague and friend and family member, which will be at the end of the program. Now, when we think about Professor Rajguru, so many things come to our mind. And one of them is the fact that he was the eternal interpreter of landscapes. So, what do we mean by that? We all know a lot about his career, about his extensive publications and his fieldwork across the country. But we feel that for some individuals, the desire to acquire knowledge is an eternal quest. And one such person was our very own Guruji. In his passion to decode secrets closely held in the complex world of India's quaternary landscapes, he emerges supreme among students of the past. Despite his phenomenal knowledge, he saw himself as a humble student, constantly striving to gain new knowledge from his beloved landforms and sharing this, more importantly, sharing this freely with all who wish to learn. It is this rare mix of scholarship and simplicity that attracted countless people from the academic world and beyond. As in the case of many other teachers at the Deccan College during this time, his brilliance lay in enabling a student to understand the complexity of quaternary geomorphology with nothing more than a blackboard, chalk, and immense passion and enthusiasm. His love for the subject was infectious and a fascinating rite of initiation into the discipline. Fieldwork with Professor Rajguru, as all others will also say today, was an experience that was nothing short of enlightening. Each rock and layer was decoded, traced through time, linked to formations in the landscape, and situated within the context of how prehistoric populations would have experienced the same. Hypotheses proposed in the field without the benefits of modern technology or sophisticated instrumentation hold good even today, even after several decades of research, and this is corroborated even at present. Age was no barrier for him, and we have all much to learn from his childlike curiosity for the subject, before which age and illness had no meaning. His enthusiasm to visit new regions was infectious. Post retirement, his shop became a university, with students flocking there for discussions over tea. His ability to make every student and colleague feel that they were the most important person in the world led to a lot of goodwill that his knowledge and personal touch brought to many people. As a person, his humility touched everyone. The irrelevance of material trappings, his enjoyment of simple food in Vaishali and other hotels that he loved to visit for academic discussions. His greatest contribution was that his consistent research on a pan-Indian scale could convince the world of quaternary scientists of the importance of archaeology, not only to obtain a relative date for formations, but also to elevate archaeology to a status of high importance. So, in this 25th year, we are very honored. Our institute has been thinking about this for a long time, and we finally got together the resources to institute a series of memorial lectures and awards, the first of which is in the name of Professor S.N. Rajguru and many others for other scholars that we will be shortly announcing. So, without much ado, I think we are delighted, we are honored to have with us here Professor Sheila Mishra, to deliver the first Professor S.N. Rajaguru Memorial Lecture. Over to you, Prachi.
Yeah. So, with in memories of Sir, we are now starting our today's first memorial lecture, and I'm honored to speak today and introduce Sheila ma'am today. So, Professor Sheila Mishra, we all know about her, who has been an archaeologist from the BA level, and she has completed her BA honors in archaeology from Simon Fraser's University, Burnaby, in Canada. The rest of her education from MA onwards has been carried out at the Deccan College Postgraduate Research Institute, from where she finally retired as a professor of geoarchaeology and also as a head of department. Her PhD work was concentrated in understanding the Narmada Valley in the stretch from Barwa to Barwani, and later she did a project on Godavari. She was also a part of disciplinary projects of the Thar Desert. Her investigations in Metakeri, which began in 1990 and Morgaon in 2002, have been landmark sites which have been helped in establishing the very foundation of multiple aspects of Indian prehistory. She, along with her many colleagues, continues to work on these sites, covering diverse perspectives. In the year 1978, Professor Sheila Mishra met Professor Rajaguru, and they began their long relationship as a mentor and later as a colleague. She has also participated in many fieldwork with Rajguru sir. Today, in this presentation, she will be discussing with us about some of the selected examples from her work that geoarchaeology is such an integral part of understanding in any archaeological problem that it should be actually be just archaeology. And geoarchaeology is required to understand like some of the key aspects like formation processes or landscape evolution, occurrence of artifacts, and also the absence of artifacts, artifact typology or the paleo environments, and human use of the landscapes. So, with these few examples, she will be illustrating each of these headings and she will be presenting it today. And with this, now I welcome Professor Sheila Mishra to give her first Rajguru Sir Memorial lecture today. Welcome, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you for
Welcome. Welcome.
yeah. Okay. I'm very honored to be asked to give this lecture in honor of Dr. Rajguru, and let me get my thing.
You can make
Yeah,
it full
ma'am,
screen.
just make it full screen.
Yeah, it is
Yes.
full screen now.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so I was trying to. Okay, yeah. So first, I have my first slide is about, of course, Rajguru. I yeah, as there are a number of things about Rajguru, but the first thing even Dr. Shanti has said that he for everyone everyone felt that they were the favorite when they were with him. He had that ability to focus only on your problem, whether it was academic or even personal. And at that time, I won't say he's humble. He didn't have his own ego. He would focus on your point of view. He had the ability to be on your point of view, on your side. So that when he advised you, he was not thinking about anybody else's, like what is good for anyone else. He was thinking solely what was good for you, what was the best thing about your research. He didn't think like, how will it work with my research? How will this happen? And so you could very I mean, and almost everybody who interacted with him, he was a very positive and important factor in whatever their research or their life. So I was very privileged because I was employed at Deccan College to have him right from my MA days right up to his retirement and beyond his retirement. So I would say that I had more chance to have the Rajaguru than other people, but I won't say that he was more important to me than to anyone else. Um, okay. Now, in general, yeah, actually, wait, in general, I think more or less, yeah, this has already been said, but I do feel like, geoarchaeology, the reason why archaeology is so multidisciplinary is not because it's a very weird subject, but because we study physical objects. So to study them, there are so many different methodologies. And one of them is like you start with the geology, you start with where it's found, which will be found in some geological context. So the very first thing that the archaeologist has to do is to understand that. And so geology is intimately, so the geological methodology, many things are in common. But what we want to find out is not the same. And that is why very often very good geologists are not that helpful to solve your problem. I remember looking at a section of the Gomti River with I.B. Singh. He's the top person to study the Ganga. But he said, he looked at the section and he said, just forget about all the post-depositional processes. And then he was trying to understand what it told you about how the Ganga behaves. Whereas for me, I want to know if there is something in that deposit, what's happened since it was deposited, how old is it? So for me, when I look at that section, the first thing I look is the depositional features. So although you require the same expertise in the same subject, what is important for understanding your problem may not be the same for somebody who's looking at that same section or same context with the idea of understanding something different. Anyway, even as I prepared this presentation, I realized that it's not actually just geo, it's just science. It's like the whole process of trying to understand what you're looking at. So when we do some study, we get some data, we find out something, and we decide, we make some hypothesis about what it means. But sometimes, as you do a little more work, some additional information comes into view or is found out, and then your earlier idea does not make sense. And it's these things where it does not make sense that the real joy of science comes, because then you have to rethink it and find out a different way of explaining it. And then when it actually fits together and it starts to make sense, then I don't know, that's the biggest joy. So these different examples I'm giving are more like little problems where some hypothesis which was widely accepted did not make sense. Okay, so the examples that I've sort of taken, why are Acheulean sites less common in areas of Deccan trap basalt? Second, why does Nivasian and Acheulean occur in the same gravel at Nivasa? Are Sonian and Acheulean contemporary in northwestern India? Why are so many artifacts in the Astoli alluvial fan, and why are there only Acheulean artifacts? Do rivers in India have terraces? If not, does that mean there is no tectonics? Are aeolian processes important in preserving sites in India? Why are the phases of aggradation different in Bhima and Godavari basins? So basically, I've got the clock here. I'm looking at the time, and I will see how far I go through these. I have been very brief. There's not many slides, but I still think I will. I don't want to curtail the time for talking about Rajaguru. And you can talk to me about these at any time. Now, this was the first thing that really puzzled me. When I came as an MA student, there was this general thing that, Acheulean man avoided Deccan trap areas. And this was basically idea of Robert Brucefoot, because he had worked mostly in the quartzite areas where he fought a lot of Acheulean sites. And after retirement, he worked in Baroda state, which was all Deccan trap. There was no Acheulean. So it was like, okay, there's something different. And what is the most obvious different thing is the bedrock. So this idea was kind of hanging around, but it doesn't. Why would basalt have anything to do with how favorable that area was for people? And also, as soon as Sankalia started to work in the late 40s and early 50s, it also turned out not to be true, because one of the very first discoveries of Sankalia was Acheulean at Gangapur, that was followed up by Acheulean at Nivasa, and then the huge amount of Acheulean that Corvinus worked on at Chirki Nivasa. Then Sali also found Acheulean at Yeser Badne. So it was known at this time in the early 80s, when I started thinking about this, that no, it's not true. Acheulean people were in the Deccan Trap region, but it is true that there are considerably less amount of evidence for Acheulean in the Deccan Trap. So it doesn't make sense for the quartzite regions to be preferred. Not really, because the basalt area has better soil, better retention of water, better vegetation. I mean, they are actually the more favorable zones in the present day environment. So anyway, I did a literature review, try to find out all the basalt sites, and my explanation was that it was nothing to do with a preference for one area of bedrock, but it was more the better resistance of quartzite to weathering compared with basalt. So in the for basalt tools, they had to be buried and they had to be under exposure. So the only evidence for Acheulean man that survived in the basalt areas was only the sites that had been buried and well preserved. Whereas in the quartzite areas, you had a lot of sites which were semi-surface, embedded in rubble, and the chemistry of the two types of rocks is also very different, with quartzite being the most resistant to weathering because it's in a good balance with the surface conditions, whereas basalt forms within the Earth's crust and it's a kind of unstable at the surface conditions, so it weathers much faster. So this was the first thing in which understanding this distribution did depend on kind of considering geological factors. Now, this Acheulean and Nivasian. So Sankalia was actually one of his main goals was to kind of make a Stone Age sequence for India. And there was a lot of problem because right from Brucefoot was like there's Paleolithic and Neolithic. Then they started to find microliths. But where was the stuff in between? Where was it? Where is the middle Paleolithic? So when Sankalia started working at Nivasa, he actually started his work, his first interest there was in the protohistoric site there. But he used to do exploration during the weekends, during when the excavation was going on. They discovered a lot of fossils, they discovered these Acheulean tools. But some of the gravels at Nivasa did not have Acheulean, they had only flake tools. So Sankalia was like, he said, okay, his problem now, he thought he has an answer. That, okay, here we have something which is not got Acheulean with it. This must be later than it. So we have a sequence, lower Paleolithic, middle Paleolithic, and then he'd also put microliths more or less into the upper Paleolithic. However, when more work was done, it was found like Dr. Pappu excavated, Dr. Rajaguru and Pappu, Murthy and Ansari, Corvinus, everybody who was excavating, they found that basically the Acheulean and the Nivasian were in the same gravels. They could not be different time. So then this idea was that, okay, that means that Middle Paleolithic and Acheulean people, these two technologies were coexisting. And then if the Middle Paleolithic, at that time they thought Middle Paleolithic may be some 40,000 years, then that means that the Lower Paleolithic was also could be so young. So all the things, the archaeology, the fossils, everything was just like, because of thinking these things are different, and then all the other evidence was that they were the same time, this did not make sense. And that is actually when things don't make sense, that's when things get interesting. So as I had already seen that there was a big difference between how well basalt gets preserved compared with siliceous rocks like quartzite. Now in the Deccan Trap region, we do not have quartzite, but the secondary minerals which fill in the voids of in Deccan Trap, they are siliceous. And so they have a survival potential just like quartzite. Now the thing is that the siliceous rocks found in the Deccan Trap region, they occur as small nodules, whereas the basalt occurs in any size. So if you have some process which removes basalt, then you remove the big tools and you are left with. So this is my explanation for the Nivasian and the Acheulean. This also I've written it up, so there's more details there. But the basic thing was like if you read Corvinus's book where she's talking about Turkey, she says basically there's no difference on the basalt flakes found with the Acheulean and the siliceous flakes which were the Nivasian. And in fact, in one they even did have like one jasper hand found at the Lakshmi Nala location. So again, what you're finding is if you don't think of the formation processes or how geological processes work on your original stone tool assemblage after the tools were discarded, you may actually misunderstand the typology of the artifacts. It's not just context, it's not just environment, but even your archaeological material also may be misinterpreted. And this confusion of the flake component of Acheulean as being Middle Paleolithic was also done by Olchin. So I wrote a small paper about Bedagard. And afterwards I found that was Olchin's type section. And she had also said the same thing, that you have a flake component over Acheulean. But it's the same thing that you had at Nivasa. So we have to be very careful that, you really need to understand the formation process of the site. You have to have a model for it, what's happening. Okay, now the next one, which was another puzzle, another thing that, okay, it initially made sense. There are the Sonian and the Acheulean contemporary in Northwest India. Now this was a big paradigm. In the 30s, in between, just before the Second World War, all these global syntheses which were made about the Lower Paleolithic divided the Lower Paleolithic into two regions. That you had Acheulean in India, or Acheulean in Europe, India, and Africa. And in Southeast Asia and China, East Asia, you had chopping tool industry. So this was thought of as a deep division. Chopping tool industry was Homo erectus, more primitive, and the more advanced people of Europe. And Africa also was a little bit out of it. They thought that it must be younger than the Acheulean, than the European Acheulean. Now we know that's all wrong. That actually is the African and probably the Indian Acheulean, which is the oldest. So they thought of this as two contemporary, technologies which represent different species of humans, different levels of technological competence, and so on. Now India was very important in this, because in India you had both of them in this Son Valley of which is now in the Potwar plateau of Pakistan, but also within India also. So this was more or less accepted. This has got such a huge impact on Indian archaeology in the beginning. It's actually completely outdated, but there are still some people who hold to this. Now, the first new observation that happened was Mohapatra. And what Mohapatra, this is the 1980s, not Mohapatra and also Rishi and Kumar, a number of people, they reported, and in fact also Denner, they all reported that they were getting Acheulean. They knew that there was Acheulean and Sonian. But the thing was, now Mohapatra's contribution was he realized that the Acheulean is found in a different context than the Sonian. So he called it as the frontal range. So where the Shivalik rocks were exposed, then he found Acheulean sites. And in the dune valleys, was the context for the Sonian. Now he interpreted this that this is like, yeah, he didn't abandon the kind of two people hypothesis, but he considered like, okay, this is showing that they have different ecological different preferences. But the thing was, and I realized this when I accompanied Dr. Rajaguru uh, for seeing the work that Corvinus had done in Nepal. And then I realized that it's just two different contexts. She had Acheulean, but she didn't even think of calling anything Sonian because for her it was so obvious. She was basically had been trained as a geologist. So she knew, okay, where you're getting the older rocks, you get Acheulean. And then all of this is younger. It cannot be Acheulean. It's all late Pleistocene. So she gave different names like Bracuti industry and so on. But I realized that what she's calling Bracuti industry, because how could it be Sonian? Because Sonian is lower Paleolithic. That's when I realized that, okay, the dune valleys are younger than where the Shivalik rocks are outcropping. And that means that these are not contemporary at all. They belong to some two completely different time periods. So the Acheulean and Sonian are found in different ages and they are not contemporary. Now, I have no idea about the chopper chopping tool of China and Southeast Asia, but I do suspect that this is something that may be even outside of India. Okay, now I'm talking about, these are sort of quite theoretical, like it's just a kind of looking at the data, reconsidering it from a different point of view, and then coming to a different conclusion. But this is a site of Astoli, which was discovered by Reza Abbas, and I excavated it with him, with his institute, and he was finding Acheulean. So we took a small trench, we got some artifacts, and we still haven't written the paper, but our first attempt to write a paper was, then I just realized that there was so much more to the site and so many things that sort of didn't make sense, which made sense when you really looked at the geological context. So this is the site, it's near Bundi, and this is something called the Great Boundary Fault. It's not the Himalayan Great Boundary Fault, but this is the fault between the Archean and the Proterozoic. So this is a big ridge, and the top of this ridge is 100 meters above this alluvial fan. Now this small stream, which is emerging from behind this ridge, has cut through this entire ridge of 100 meters, and a small alluvial fan has been created. So there are a series of such fans, 5 or 6 of them, and each one of them has Acheulean, and this is where Acheulean is found. So we applied for permit, we got some funding from Reza's Institute, and we took a small trench in this area, just where the fan emerges. But this gravel had no calcrete, and I was telling Reza, if it has no calcrete, it cannot be Acheulean. But we excavated, and we did find a couple of Acheulean tools, but we also got, like Reza didn't really accept what I said until we got pottery. So here you have some kind of old shrine. There's some special kind of trees here. So this has got modern human activity, maybe 1700s, the village was here and now it's shifted here. But there's also Acheulean there, because it's lying on, the Acheulean tools are lying on the surface. So then we went further into this Nala and we selected another place, and there we got Acheulean in a really cemented setting. Let's see. Yeah, this is looking from the top. So this was our first trench, was somewhere here. This was like, so stuff is still coming down from the hill. So you have a mixing of this older stuff along, you can see this small place here. There is some pottery. So the Acheulean is old, but you're in a younger context. So we went further down. This is, you can see this the alluvial fan here. And this is where we took the second trench. So it's in that main waterway, and here you can see you have a little bit reddened horizon and then the calcretized horizon. So the eschelian was occurring in both of these horizons. And we identified many of them as artifacts. So now I feel, but when they were so much covered with calcrete that you really couldn't, so you see how these are all numbered. When I went to see these artifacts, I feel that, a lot of the stuff is not actually artifacts, but some of, like, these are different. This is a small miniature cleaver, this is a cleaver, and this is a hand axe. And these are coming from this. So initially we thought like there are hundreds of artifacts. Like it was almost like 5-6% of the stones looked like they had been flaked. Now I think, again, that was something that didn't make sense. I was thinking like if there's so much human activity, this is in such an arid zone, and if this alluvial fan is an ongoing process, then why do we only have eschelian? You should have later material also. And this does happen, like at the site of Hirakpur Khadan in the Narmada Valley, which Namrata studied, which was excavated by the ASI. There's a rubble, a quartzite rubble, and in the upper part of it you have flakes, you have microblades, and then below that you have the eschelian. So there is a kind of stratigraphy that this rubble is slowly accumulating, and you have a difference in the artifacts being discarded as that rubble is slowly accumulating. Now here it wasn't like that. There was no microliths, there was no Middle Paleolithic. Everything that was there that looked like an artifact was actually eschelian only. So it did occur to me, like, how do you explain that? So when I looked at this picture, this whole context, it becomes obvious that this alluvial fan was formed during the time period of eschelian. And looking at the very refined nature of that one of those hand axes and that small cleaver, probably late eschelian. Now, initially it appeared that the rubble had a very high number of artifacts, but when I tried to analyze them, although they had bulb-like features, many of them were just rubble chunks with a kind of bulb on it. And they didn't really fit into any reduction sequence. So the number of artifacts probably much less. And in fact, you saw how tiny that trench was. Even if you just accept the 3 or 4 really nice finished tools, it's still a fairly high density of artifacts. So the two refreshed, I mean, it could have started accumulating earlier, but the two fresh refined tools, a hand axe and a miniature cleaver, I think they give a maximum age for the fan. And also it's not like pre-eschelian. So the fan formation is due to the reactivation of the Great Boundary Fall, and almost like around 100 meters of uplift occurred. And this has occurred within the late Eschelian period. So it may not be a few thousand years, it may be tens of thousands or 100,000 years, but whatever it is, the time period when this happened is contemporary with some part of the Eschelian. So this is where, like, if you just looked at the artifact, like, okay, first you had to understand what was a kind of old context for the tool and which was the young context for the tool. And then seeing that why, like, so I started with the idea that quartzite artifacts survive, basalt doesn't. But here it looks like even in this area, it's only in these fans that you really, or some other kind of rubble accumulation, that you get eschelian. So even quartzite eschelian tools require some kind of process to get buried. Now, do rivers in India have terraces? Okay, let me see. Now I'm coming to close to the end. I think this is a bit complex, so let me go to the next one. Okay, let me go directly to the first thing was that very early in my exploration of Narmada, it was very obvious that these rivers do not have terraces. Now, the reason for that, like, why they don't have terraces is a different thing. But basically, you would get, basically, these rivers are not changing their base level. So basically, when you have a terrace sequence, the base level is going down. There's a lowering of the base level. So these terraces are abandoned floodplains. So they're at a higher level where the river no longer reaches, and then it cuts down to one base level, and then the base level changes. It cuts down to a lower one. This is how the terraces form. But what you find in not just Narmada, but all the rivers of India, of peninsular India, and I think even Indo-Gangetic Plain is almost the same. You have the older alluvium where the river where the normal floods never reach, and then you have this inset zone where you have the present day river, and the stage level in the floods is huge compared with any European rivers. And the difference between the maximum flow of the river and the base flow of the river is also very enormous. So basically, the floods are so much more important that it's the processes which are occurring over a short period of time are forming the landscape rather than the daily processes. And this is why these rivers are not actually forming floodplains as such. So I just assumed during my PhD work and for many years later that there is no tectonics because base level change is not happening. But then I was really shocked, found out I was completely wrong. So this is another big fault near Barwani. It's also, I think it's called the Barwani Fault. And you can see the rivers coming from the Satpuras. So you have this river here, the Sosa River, and it takes this turn parallel to the Narmada and then joins the Narmada. So what we found is that this stretch of this river is an older channel, which was the channel of the river as recently as Chalcolithic, because there are a number of Chalcolithic mounds along this stretch. But you also have Acheulean here, and you can see the tilting of the sediments also. So this is closer view of the same zone. This is the Ottawad village. And here the river takes this big turn. This is the older channel of the Narmada. You can see this big hill of basalt. The river is on the other side of the hill. So in this zone, I'm not exactly sure where, but I think this is like this Piplode and Ottawad were two Chalcolithic sites. Like 4 or 5,000 years ago, this was the Narmada River. And from the Chalcolithic sites, they're getting the fish hooks, the fish remains, and we're all puzzled, like, where were the fish, where was the water? It's so obvious once you realize it, this was the river, okay? But in this zone, you also have Acheulean. So probably this was a very stable for a long time, and the river was here from Acheulean up to Chalcolithic times, and it has recently shifted towards the north. So this is in that stretch, and you can see absolutely horizontal bedding of the fluvial sills, and then this is overlain by a gravel, and this gravel has Acheulean artifacts. And on the other side, you have the yellow silt, which has the Chalcolithic artifacts. And then suddenly, you can see these beds are completely tilted, and then there's a unconformity. You can see this has been truncated, and you have other horizontal above it. And this gravel here has yielded 2 or 3 hand axes were found from this. So this is my former student Sonali made this cross section to show it. So you can see like this pinkish we have made as the Acheulean deposits. There was a well here which I'm showing. From this well, 20 meters below, this farmer found a hand axe. I found it from this is here, which was found from the soil, from the sand at the bottom of this well. And then you have the Chalcolithic material. And then you have this hill, in between this whole older channel and the present channel. So the present channel has only young deposits. And to the north, you have almost, just a kind of small cover of yellow silt. You get some, middle early Holocene high channel. And here the river is completely flowing in bedrock. Okay, so here is another, I think actually, yeah. So here is another kind of puzzle, which I, I realized it from the radiocarbon dates. So when I made a kind of a review of the radiocarbon dates from Bhima and Godavari basins, and I found that the aggradation of the rivers of the tributaries of the Bhima were mostly during the LGM. 26 to 14,000 years was the range in which the dates were coming for the alluvium from the Bhima basin. But in the Godavari basin, they were all Holocene. All the radiocarbon dates were Holocene. There were no late Pleistocene dates. So what is the difference? Both these rivers are in Deccan Trap. There's hardly any difference in the climate between these two regions. So why is there so much difference between the periods of aggradation for these two rivers? So my conclusion there was, like, I think this is another thing Rajaguru would always talk, allothenous and I forget now, but the rivers which have which are bringing water from a high rainfall zone out of where the stretch you are studying. So in the Bhima basin, all these rivers start from the high rainfall Western Ghat zone. So when they come to Pune, they are bringing the water from where it rains, like you're going from the humid zone into the semi-arid zone. Now in the Godavari basin, you see that almost all the tributaries of the Godavari, they're sort of truncated. There's been a kind of river capture in that part of the zone. And so most of the tributaries of the Godavari, they're actually originating within the dry zone. So the whole balance between aggradation and erosion is different, these different kinds of rivers. And at Talegaon, we could see it very well. Like, we got all these Holocene dates. And then when you see the Bhima alluvium, I got ostrich eggshell. No date, but the ostrich eggshell would be an indicator of an arid late Pleistocene. So the Bhima river was aggrading during the late Pleistocene, but the Vale river, which originates from the dry zone, is aggrading during the Holocene humid phase. So, okay, I won't talk about this. Okay, so now there are many things to talk about. I could have added some more. But the common thing is, first of all, you have to consider all the geological processes to understand whether it is typology, whether it is the site context, why, basically, when we're looking at Paleolithic artifacts, to survive, they need to be buried, and to be found, they need to be exposed. So this is like, you have a very small window for finding things. So when you are working in any area, you have to understand the age of the sediments that you're studying. Now, unfortunately, geologists also don't very often know it. Like, I remember when Shanti was excavating at Atirampakkam, and where she was getting Acheulean, it was the geologists thought it was a Cretaceous clay. But actually it's just a redeposited Cretaceous clay. So her finding of Acheulean in that clay was basically how you knew that it wasn't Cretaceous. Okay, so sometimes it's the archaeological material dates the sediments, and that is a more firm way of knowing the age, that it's definitely in the Quaternary and it's not pre-Quaternary, just because the artifacts are there. But however you come to know the age, the first is that you are not going to get evidence for any time period where there was no deposition going on. So, and then you have these thresholds where a process needs some threshold to happen. And according to, the sediment discharge ratio, it can be different in different basins or different contexts. Now, this actually helps archaeologists. So if you want to learn about late Pleistocene, microblades, then you have to look in the Bhima Basin. But if you want to look at the origin of agriculture, then you should go to the Godavari Basin, where there is actually an early Holocene record, where you can, which you can look for this evidence. So not finding the evidence is just that there was no possibility of it to get preserved. Now you could have preservation of evidence, it might be preserved, but it's inaccessible to you. So this destructive processes which are exposing the sites, this is actually where you find them. So we are always in the unhappy situation that if you find the site, it means it's under destruction. So we have to be very careful and very fast in recording them. So now when Shanti is finding so many sites, they're all being destroyed. But probably if you had worked 15 years earlier, she would have never found them, because they would be still buried, completely undetectable. So we have to work with this, and you remember it. It would never exist unless it got buried, and you'd never find it unless it's getting exposed. This is basic rule number 1. Then you need to understand the site formation processes before you even understand the artifacts. Why do we so much underestimate what's missing? And the thing is that how do you deal with that? So the thing is, you don't deal with it by just making it up. Saying, oh, well, this got destroyed, but it must have been there. No, you have no way of knowing what's gone. It's what is there tells you what's gone, okay? It's the presence of something shows you, like, even if you get one flake, you knew that human beings lived there, okay? But you need that it's not that you have no evidence, you have some evidence which tells you about the missing evidence, okay? So you always, whatever you find, you have to understand that's just a little bit of it, but it implies, in fact, it proves the existence of so much stuff which is missing. So it's what you have is what you need to use to understand what's missing. There's some stuff which is totally gone, nothing is left. But even when you come, people think like, in any archaeology textbook, they say, okay, organic stuff doesn't remain, this, that. But then there's a kind of feeling that, stone tools though, what happens to them? No, even stone tools are not indestructible. And even stone tools, I think, don't really survive unless, unless they got preserved. I basically don't think that any site survives today, even fairly recent ones, unless it got some kind of preservation, mostly by burial. So you have to think of all the different burial processes. Different regions have different, like, if you just think about it, like if you look at a geology textbook, okay, that's it. I think let us have some time to talk about Rajaguru, because there are 100 more things to talk about. So again, I'll just like to thank everybody for hearing me and giving me a chance to talk about some of my favorite things, to remember Rajaguru, because he was the person who would get it, what you were saying, he would be able to criticize it. And then if he didn't understand it, he would listen to you. And then when he would agree with you, or he would change you, So that was such a privilege. Like, it was never, he never would feel insulted. I'm your guide. How can you disagree with me? I know so much. No, he never had that feeling. It was just like, if I would give him all these ideas, some of them he would have said, Sheila, like I could tell he would not be really agreeing to it. Maybe unlike me, I would tell him immediately, like, no, why is it like this? I would never think that he would get insulted, because he never did. But then, and I didn't actually realize what a great thing that was. That was just ordinary, But then afterwards I realized, like, I was so lucky that there was nobody else who would have taken any idea and considered it. And that I continued with my students also. So I remember somebody came to talk to me and I was giving one of my theories and I said, okay, this theory, even my students have accepted, you know? And that the person that I was listening to thought, you know, your students agree. Of course they agree with you. And what I meant was, none of them would have accepted it until I convinced them. And so this has been tested by 3 or 4 other people's consideration. So this was how the kind of intellectual environment which Rajguru fostered with everybody. And he would be able to take anybody and bring them to that level to some extent, to be questioning, he had all kinds of students. All the students were not brilliant, but there's not a single thesis submitted under him which does not have some original thing, which he could discern that in this kachra, there's a lot of kachra about everyone. He could get that gem from your kachra and say, go with this and do it. And so I think that is what I was trying to honor in this lecture. And yeah, okay, so thank you. And I think now let's other people have a time to talk.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sheila Mishra, for this very thought-provoking lecture. And I think it's a very wonderful way to begin Professor S.N. Rajguru Memorial Lecture Series, because it has raised not only the key issues in Indian prehistory that all of us need to go on thinking about, you force us actually to rethink, just like Professor Rajguru did, and you force us to wake up and to consider some of the questions that we often take for things that we often take for granted, and make us take these up as challenges. And these are questions of relevance not only for the regions which you have mentioned, but also, as you correctly say, across India. Even in the area where we are working today, we have to face these problems and challenges. And we wish Professor Rajguru was alive today to come down, and we keep thinking when we go in the field that, oh, we wish he was here to explain this to us or that to us. So I think this was a wonderful talk, and I'm sure all the audience will agree with it. Because this is a memorial lecture, unfortunately, we are not having questions right now. But I'm happy to say that we are starting another series in which you can have one-to-one questions with many eminent scholars like Professor Sheila Mishra and many others in the audience. And that we will launch next year as part of our 25th year celebrations. So now I am very happy to move on to the second part of this program. Thank you, Professor Mishra, and please stay on because there's more things coming up. As we told, Professor S.N. Rajaguru Memorial Geoarchaeology Award, and we are really happy to say that the first award goes to Mr. Ronald. He's here in the audience today. He is a student of Professor Pramod Singh from the Department of Earth Sciences, University of Pondicherry. We will have a short introduction to him by Ms. Shutonuka following this. What is this award series? These are short and long-term fellowships which are awarded to candidates. And these fellowships are to conduct specific research related to projects conducted by us or our colleagues. They will work closely with our experts at our center and with those institutes we are collaborating with. And we hope that this will result in publications in peer-reviewed international journals. With that, I would like to hand it over to Ms. Shutonuka Bhattacharya to speak about Ronald.
Hi, thank you so much, firstly, Sheila ma'am, for this wonderful lecture. I had a very short interaction with Professor Rajguru, and it was during COVID, and it was over the phone. And I've never met him personally, but he took the time out to actually discuss our questions, however irrelevant it felt at that moment. And he, even without slides or pictures or without the landscape, just over the phone, he could create the landscape for us. And I think it's a huge leap. And on that note, and I'm very happy to actually introduce Ronald to everybody. So Ronald is a research scholar in the Department of Earth Sciences, School of Physical, Chemical and Applied Sciences in Pondicherry University. He did his BSc and MSc in Geology from Guwahati University. He's currently working on the reconstruction of past climate from the lake sediments in Manipur region of Northeast India using multi-proxy approach as a part of his PhD research work under the guidance of Professor Pramod Singh, who I think we also have the privilege of being with us today. In the past years, he had the opportunity to carry out his research work at reputed labs like the AMS lab at the IUS in New Delhi and the PRISM lab at ISER Mohali. He has also attended various workshops and conferences and interacted and presented his research with others. His research is also available online. If somebody is interested, please go ahead and look them up. And besides that, and besides his own subject of research, he's also actively involved in research related to recent sediment and surface processes with special focus on sediment geochemistry. So congratulations, Ronald, from all of us. And I had the privilege of interacting with him very closely for a small workshop. And I'm very happy that you have received this award. Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations, Ronald, and we are really looking forward to working with you. He will be working on geoarchaeological some questions related to sites in Tamil Nadu, and I'm sure he'll do the memory of Professor Rajaguru proud and will achieve very good publications coming out of this. Okay, thank you, Ronald. Thank you, Ronald, and we look forward to discussing more with you after the program is over. Now, the third part of our program comprises memories, thoughts, and reminiscence from both Professor Rajguru's family members and his many colleagues and students who are present here. So, to begin this, I would kindly request Mr. Meher, Ms. Dipti Rajguru, Ms. Vaidehi Rajguru to unmute and speak a few words. Vaidehi, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Am I audible?
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
So we discussed all of us, and then we decided that on behalf of the family, I'm the only one who's going to speak today, so that the students may get more time to share their memories instead. I hope that's all right.
Yes, wonderful. Please.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to thank the organizers for holding this program and then giving everybody an opportunity to discuss his memories and overall remember him, who he was as a guide and who he was as a person, because I'm sure everybody here remembers him very fondly. And then to do something like that after almost, not almost, 2 whole years after his passing, that itself is a huge deal. And all of us at home are very honored and then also a little overwhelmed that people still talk about him and remember him in the field, because I am doing also a PhD in life sciences. So I also know how fast the field moves on. And then for people to remember you after so many years, your contribution, what that talks about your contribution to the field and in your students' lives as well. So that's a huge thing according to all of us. So I thought I'll take this time, take this opportunity to share a few memories of his that everybody in the family had. So as a geoarchaeologist, I'm sure you people know more than us that how extensively he was in the field in the initial parts of his career. And then in the last few years, especially after he passed away, we also discovered some of the old letters and then old diaries. And then he talks extensively about how much he loves to his students. But one more thing that I want to highlight here is that he was also a very, despite his research always being on his mind, he was also a very caring father, loving husband as well. And every time he was leaving the country for extended amounts of time, leaving his home for extended amounts of time, he still took the time to remember his family members, always inquired after them. Even when my father and his sister were in school, he always had the time to, ask after their academic progress, and then all of his cousins, nieces, nephews, and all of that. So he very much loved to spend time with his family. and often thought of his own parents, own siblings, not siblings, his own cousins when he was going to places. And then there will be many incidences in his letters that I went to XYZ place and I thought of you people. So he was always, I mean, maybe he had a very different way of showing it, but he was a very caring person. Then even when I was young, when I was 7 or 8 years old, when he was going in the field or traveling anywhere, he'd be sure to bring a souvenir for everybody. Then many times he would write a small postcard for me. And then as a child, it meant a huge deal that I'm getting a letter which is just for me and, addressed specifically to me. So that was another fun memory. Then, and then I'm sure you all must be also aware of how fond he was of celebrating people's achievements, even if they were very small achievements. That, you got good marks in school, then okay, let's get some ice cream, or somebody did something nice, then he will like give some money that you go and get some sweets or get some ice cream. And then I would say that as a person, he had a very clean mind. And then he was very straightforward. And then he was like that at home also. And then he really appreciated everything that people did for him and everything that everybody else did for him. Then moving on, I would also like to make a point that if you look at his generation, people born in the 1930s and 40s, I would say that his thoughts were also exceptionally ahead of his time in who he was as a person. Because I've heard about this from some of his students and then seen this firsthand at home also. He never discriminated within people just because you're a woman, you might not be able to do this. Or he always believed that on a person's merit as a person themselves, and then didn't really pay attention to traditional gender roles or anything like that, which I feel was hugely miles and light years ahead of many other people of his time. So as a woman and as his granddaughter, that is something that I recognized maybe a little late in my life, but that is something that I do appreciate immensely. And even in our house, he always encouraged me and then everybody else to pursue higher education. And it was never stressing about the marks or anything like exams or anything like that. His insistence was to, learn the topic and learn your field of study properly so that you actually understand. Don't study it for the sake of exams. And then, so whenever I was young, also used to, when I was very young, he would take me on hikes. And then near hills of Pune, sometimes he will help me collect some pebbles and talk about them so that I would also understand what it was. Then when I was in masters, so I was a biology student. And one time I remember I had an assignment about evolution of life on Earth, which had talked about what the prehistoric environment was like. And then I had to present that paper next day morning. And then he used to go very early to bed at almost 9 o'clock at night. So, but still just to help me understand some of the things, he stayed up till almost midnight, read that paper himself, then explained to me. And then that was just huge. And he was already touching 80 at that point. So still, just for the love of the subject, he always felt that more people should understand what geology is and archaeology is. And then he also had this capacity to really simplify things for people like us who didn't really have a background in the subject, but it also made us easy to remember things. And then another way I thought of him, or rather appreciated him, was during my PhD coursework, that we had a course for evolutionary biology. And then the instructor was asking something about why the skeletons of animals which are usually found at sea level are found on Himalayas. And as somebody, I actually knew the answer to that and I said it in class. And then the instructor himself was surprised that why, as you who has a degree in biology, knowing about tectonic plates and age of Himalaya as a mountain. And then I only have him to thank for all this, because he never sat down and taught all those things, but it was something that he would discuss, that he used to love watching movies. And then some scene will come, and that time he would start talking about, okay, do you know where this desert is? The pattern of sand is like that because the stone is like that, and things like that. So yeah. And then just to end my talk, I would like to talk about, as a research person and as somebody who is currently doing her PhD, the things I learned from him. One is definitely the passion that you need to have for your subject to continue a career in academics for so long. And secondly, notes taking. I think that is something that because I've heard from many people and I've seen firsthand how extensively he used to take notes about everything, not just his subject, any new thing that he came across that he read about. And then I realized what a good habit that was. And I'll be honest, I am not a extensive note taker. So that's something that I'm trying to learn, and I feel everybody would benefit from learning. So to end my talk, I would again like to thank everybody for gathering here to remember him. And I'm sure you all loved him a lot, and he was also aware of that, and he treated all his students like his second family. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Vaidehi, for these beautiful words. And we really appreciate you and your family being here on this occasion and sharing other perspectives on Professor Rajaguru. We are delighted to have you here. So we would next request Professor Kale, call on Professor Kale, and then Professor Rajaguru, Professor Ravi Purusetter is here, Professor Kale, Professor Arun Kumar, Professor Sushma Deo, and I think Dr. Jayendra Joglekar is here also, Sukanya Sharma, Dr. Sukanya Sharma is there to also speak. Over to you, Professor Kale.
Hello. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Today, I would like to just share how I came in contact with Professor Rajaguru and how I met him. So, actually, I'm a geographer. Was doing, after I completed my MA in geography, I joined SP College as a lecturer. And at that time, the government of Maharashtra had made MPhil compulsory for all the new lecturers. So I was doing my MPhil degree, my dissertation work. And at that time, the then head of the department of University of Pune, it was University of Pune at that time, Pune rather, he established an association of geographers called Institute of Indian Geographers in 1979. So that was almost 45 years ago. So in 1980, the first conference of that association was held in the department. It was a one-day meeting, and I was doing my MPhil on the verge of completion, and I made a small presentation. And it was a very ordinary presentation. And in the audience, Professor Rajaguru was there. So of course, I didn't know him. I had heard his name as a geologist. So during the lunch break in the canteen, it was not in the department, but in the canteen, he came and spoke to me about the work I was doing. And he asked me that at that time he was a reader in Deccan College. He was not a professor at that time. That you have talked in my presentation, I talked about the river. I was doing my dissertation on Shivganga River, which is south of Pune. The river originates in Sivagad area, but flows down and meets the Gunjavni River, which is in the Krishna Basin. So he asked me, did you look at the river deposits? I said, no, I don't know anything about the river deposits. And so I have no idea that how to study them, because then surprisingly, he said, okay, next time you go to the field, I'll accompany you. This I did not expect, because my own supervisor, official supervisor, when I was doing my MA dissertation and this MPhil dissertation, he did not come to the field with me. So I was really surprised that this person, I have just met him a few minutes before he came to me. So, but I said, sir, it was, I remember the date, it was 9th February 1980, because that happens to be the foundation day of the association. I said, sir, but I'm submitting my dissertation in the next month. I'm on the verge of completion. I'm just writing the final chapter. So he said, doesn't matter, let us go to the field. So next Sunday, on my scooter, because I couldn't afford to hire a vehicle. So on my scooter, we went to this place near Shivapur, about 40 kilometers south of Pune. And that time he showed me, I mean, he talked about the Quaternary deposit. That was the first time I heard about Quaternary and the deposits. He showed me how to look at the stratigraphy, different sedimentary units, how to interpret them, and what they tell us about the behavior of the river. This was something totally new to me. And believe me, I mean, I'm not going to use big words that I was impressed and so on and so forth. But if you see my thesis, which I submitted in April, and this was in the mid-February, the last chapter, conclusion, I have included one full page almost about the deposits. I have also included a small stratigraphic section in that. And I have talked about the late Pleistocene, which I had heard only from him. I had no idea about what this Pleistocene is, what Quaternary is. And there I have mentioned at 2-3 places. Personal communication, Dr. S.N. Rajaguru, reader in archaeology. So that was my first interaction. And whatever I learned there, then so after I submitted my MPhil dissertation, I immediately approached him and I said I would like to work with him, although I had no real plans to work in archaeology. But since he was a geologist, and I thought that since I have to continue in this academic field, I'll have to do research for my PhD also. And so I will learn a lot from him about the geological aspect, which was very, that particular field I was very weak because I was not trained. And most important thing that he showed me how the field work has to be done. When I was doing my MA, my supervisor didn't accompany me. I was the only student in the field of geomorphology. So I went on my own to the field area. The field area also I had selected. And I had no idea what is to be done. I traveled by ST. I just went around. I looked at some required deposits along the coastal area. So I had no idea how fieldwork is undertaken. So that was the first time I learned. And then he accepted me. Although I have also mentioned this many times, that since archaeology was not in the science faculty and geography is in the science faculty, my colleagues in the department, my head of the department in SP College and other teachers in the university department told me that if you register for PhD in archaeology, that might create problems for you in future. Your future prospects may be affected. But let me tell you that I registered in 1980, 83. Within 3 years, I submitted my thesis. I got my degree. And in 85, I joined the university as a reader. And in 92, I was professor and head of the department. So at the age of 36, I was professor and head. And that was only because of the decision that I took to work with Professor Rajaguru. And it's not only the degree, but later on, he, along with him and many of his students, we went to field trips, short 1 day, 2 day, 3 days, short field trips. So that helped me a lot, really, in teaching, not only in research, but it helped me a lot in teaching also. And the most important thing is that through him, I was able to contact many well-known, internationally reputed scientists. I was able to meet them, and I could develop collaborations, international collaborations. It was only because of him. And whatever I have achieved, whenever I got some award or I became professor or something good happened to me, as his granddaughter said, that I used to always receive a card, a postcard. And he used to, in beautiful handwriting, he used to appreciate the things. And whatever these words were, they were from his heart. And I really appreciated that. People on your face, they appreciate it. But then, I mean, you know how the attitude of the people is. So I have benefited enormously. That small decision, the first field work that we went to Shiv Ganga, that has changed my life. And whatever academic achievements I have made is solely because of him. So I would, on this occasion, I would like to express my gratitude, heartfelt gratitude to this very simple, down-to-earth person. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. That was wonderful. I request anyone who wishes to speak, Professor Korisetta, would you like to share your thoughts first?
Sir, you have to
You have to unmute, sir.
yourself. Yeah.
I think, yeah, you're.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, fine.
Thank you, Shanti, for this great initiative. Just a couple of days ago, I was looking at December calendar, and two important events had taken place, and both are related to a geologist. One is Robert Bruce Foote, who passed away 28th of December, and that was followed by Dr. Rajaguru, who passed away on 14th of December. I must say, anyway, I belong to his very, very large family. Not only the family of his kinsmen, but all his students belong to his family. That was my feeling. And I'm fortunate enough because when I first entered Deccan College, he was the first person to welcome me and introduce me to Professor Mishra, and then helped me go through the process of getting admitted for my MA course. So that from that day onwards to till about 3rd of December, before it, every week or so before his passing, I used to frequently get in touch with him, either personally or through telephonic conversation. And then after my MA, when I was little confused about the future of my career, because I had come from science background and I had very little knowledge of historical archaeology, and only little science that I learned in during the course of my MA studies was this paper on environmental archaeology, where Dr. Pappu, Dr. Rajaguru, Dr. V.N. Mishra, they were the ones who were teaching us that particular paper. Amongst all the teachers I encountered, he was the most attractive person, both because of his humility, humble nature, and also encouraging people who did not have adequate background to pick up the basics in archaeology or prehistoric archaeology, whatever. And that really made me feel very, very comfortable. And then after my MA, when I was little worried about not being a first class student, whether I will be accepted as a PhD student or not. So I just casually approached him. He said, "No, don't worry. Before coming to Pune, you please come to Hunski Valley, where Professor Padaya is excavating Acheulean sites. You can join him, and I will also be there." And that is where I got introduced to field archaeology, and especially quaternary geology and so on. But when we were students at the postgraduate level, he used to take us to the Mecca of Pune, and that is the Dattawadi section. And that is where we were introduced to silt, sand, gravel, conglomerate, and things like that. And then he was trying to help us where to look for, lower Paleolithic tools, middle Paleolithic tools, and then, what are the different types of sediments that you see along a river section and things like that. But this became much more obvious to me when I joined Professor Padaya, where he was excavating the Acheulean site, locality 5. And that is where I learned how to, understand the landscapes with which these Acheulean type sites are located. And then gradually, during the course of our fieldwork in the Hunski Valley, he said, and both of them, Professor Padaya and Dr. Rajaguru, suggested that I continue the work left behind by Professor Padaya, because he had published a couple of articles on the high-level gravels, and these high-level gravels were first identified by Robert Brucefoot, and then later when Professor Padaya was working in the Sharapur Doab, he had done extensive documentation of various sites where high-level gravels are located, and also these gravels contain the Middle Paleolithic tools and so on. And these high-level gravels are not restricted to the Sharapur Doab, and they are likely to be present beyond. And in fact, Food had indicated the presence of these gravels across the, all along the middle reaches of the Krishna River and so on. So I accepted their suggestion. I did not have any background in geology, so I had to learn basics from him, as well as from basic textbooks that he was recommending me to read. And then following that, I carried out field work, and then it was a frustrating time for me, because for us those days, research in prehistory means discover some Acheulean site, lower Paleolithic site, and any other site is of no significance for writing a PhD dissertation. This was the kind of notion we had about our PhD. But it was a frustrating time, but he did not, um, discourage me. He said, no such cold feet will give a setback to you. You continue to survey, and then there will be something which you will be able to contribute. And it really turned out that I discovered a large number of high-level gravel sites, which also contained Middle Paleolithic artifacts. And I was disappointed that there were no Acheulean tools. Anyway, and then at the end, he said, no, Ravi, don't worry. Even though you have not found good sequence of succession of lower, middle, and upper Paleolithic sites, whatever you have done is an achievement by Indian standards. That itself was the most satisfying thing that I heard from my teacher. Ultimately, my PhD examiners approved my dissertation as worthy of a PhD and so on. And subsequently, I was employed in the Physical Research Laboratory to work in that paleoclimate project. There I encountered a variety of scientists, and that gave me a much more broader base to continue to work in Quaternary area and so on and so forth. So this support that he gave during my early days in the field of archaeology, as I entered research, and then the postdoctoral fellowships were also very encouraging, because all through my association with other scientists, Professor Rajaguru is always used to be part of the collaborative teams and so on. And then post these developments in the mid-80s, I had a crisis about getting a job for myself. And that was the time he gave me the greatest moral support. It's unforgettable moral support that I received from him. Like all of you know, that he always felt, he always gave you a feeling that you are the best, you are the most nearest, person to him. And we also felt very grateful to whatever he was in terms of encouraging us to survive. And these are some of the things, whatever my personal interaction with him, my memories of interaction with him, I have already penned them down. I don't want to talk much about him. And I must say that this is a great initiative to start the lecture series as well as the award that you have instituted. Thank you, Shanti, for all this.
Thank you so much for sharing your memories. They're always wonderful to listen to thoughts about Professor Rajaguru and his influence on so many people. I would kindly request Professor Arun Kumar is here. Professor Shushma is there. Can you please unmute? Then we have Dr. Sukanya Sharma. We have Jendra Joglekar. So several generations. I think Dr. Jendra is the youngest here. Who would like to, and then we also have with us some of his other students who have joined the meeting. So if there's time, we would kindly, Dr. Shilpa Wadekar is here. We could kindly ask her also to speak. So anyone who would like to go next? Dr. Arun Kumar, is Professor Shushma Deo here? I think she's left. Sukanya, would you like to go next?
Yes,
Very well.
because thank you so much, Shanti. And I would really appreciate, or rather, it's something that Sharma Heritage Center has taken up in a way by actually bringing all of us together. I think that is also very important. An effort which actually help us to share our research. It is just paying my deep homage to him as a teacher and also as an individual, because as Sheila ma'am just said, did not even realize at that point of time that it was so enormous, the humility that he projected. And he was also the first person, individual I met once I entered Deccan College Department of Archaeology. I set foot on it. He was the joint director and he had a room right on the front side. And I had, my application was lost, which I had applied for my admissions. And I thought it would be like, I was worried. And in my worries, I think in a matter of 10 minutes, we're all removed. He got an application, he wrote my name, he wrote my parents' name, and he just told me, fill up the address and all this is fine. And my brother was with me, who was equally worried, and he told my brother also to be rest assured. And hostel, everything happened. I don't know how, it was in a matter of half an hour, I think. Everything was settled with all the worry that we went traveling from Guwahati to Pune. Now, that was how it was. And by the time when we were doing our MA, he was he was there for the first 6 months, I think, and he did come to the classes, but later he retired. But still, he would, and it was unbelievable. Like, and the things about he introduced us to Badzar. I still remember Karl Badzar's book, and I never thought that geology would come down to us as something so joyous. And he would explain to us all the time that about this section in Bhima, this section near Pune, this section in Mahabaleshwar. And then, of course, there was this field trip that we did, a number of them. He took us, and the one that he took us to Mahabaleshwar, I still remember, it was pouring, heavens were pouring. There was no way you could actually even at point open. I had glasses on, and every time I had to open my glasses, opening eyes. But that rain was no deterrent. It was all muddy, and and we were looking at him. Will he ask us to take some shelter? I think for a few minutes we took some shelter. But then it made to us a point that it was not any sort of something that could stop him, neither us. And we learned all that he wanted to show us about the laterites, etc. And the most wonderful thing is when I decided to do my PhD, and the fundamental problem that was there in Northeast India at that point of time was stratigraphy. And he asked me, because I was close to him while during doing my masters, and I immediately registered after my masters. So I wanted him but then he was not full time there. So he said, we'll be guiding you in ways which is very much required, and geoarchaeology would be one of the most important components. Now, the problem of stratigraphy we decided to look at. And I was worried. I was also reading some of the material which was published earlier. And I had also visited the sites, and I really thought, am I taking a good decision or not? But then when I started working with him, he would ask me to get pictures from him from the field trips. From my first field trip when I went back to Pune, I showed him, and he said, there, do you see? It is all clear. There is this 7.5 YR dark brown late Pleistocene formation. And then there is this 10 YR, sorry, not late Pleistocene, yes, earlier Holocene formation. And this is only what you have to be bothered about. I said, sir, is it? He said, yes. This is the stratigraphy which is across whole of your region, and it is there. And you have these industries which are buried, semi-buried. And I said, sir, but they are all on the surface. He said, only where there are activities. I was like, what is happening? Things were told, they were also confusing. But then I could figure out all this, today when I'm saying you 7.5 wire, that is the Munsell soil color chart number, it has just got into me, or rather even the Holocene yellowish brown 10 YR, I can just identify it now because it was a way which was explained to me, and also the conditions by which these assemblages were occurring and in what conditions they were getting exposed. And there were also buried context which was there. And I really found, because he had visited those places before us, and he was, I got that very pan Eastern Himalaya concept from him, because Professor Gudrun Corvinus at the same time was working in the Himalayas, and he was talking to me about the Brahuti, about all this different type of formations from where the tools are occurring, and he would tell me the discussion. So it was like he decided, because they started the shop in Lakshmi Road, and for some time he was coming only on Thursdays, and it would be Sheila ma'am's lab where he would sit, and I would be just waiting. But then it would be frequent also. And then things like, okay, these two layers are there, but then there are certain areas where this ideal formation is not there all the time. There are confusions. Then he explained to me about slips, that there are soil slips, and the valley that was working in, it was a sharp triangular valley where there were two rivers cutting across, first order streams, second order streams. I don't know if I sound right or not, but those things, and again, the formation of river terraces. So after every field work, it's not just the pictures. He also taught me to collect samples of the deposits of the sediment, and I would take, and the dry sieving, the wet sieving, the test chemical that we did, just simple ones, calcium carbonate, organic carbon in Madam Shirsagar's lab. And it was all they would show, see, look at your grains. Now, this is a slip. This is not that it has rolled and the sediment has been deposited by fluvial action, but this is something which has just slipped due to either tectonics or whatever, and you have this formation. Now, these things which have been mind-boggling, in the sense, have been very disturbing in Northeast about the stratigraphy, that there is no material which is in clear stratigraphy. The stratigraphy is missing. We do not have buried sites. Most of the sites are very recent because they are found on the surface. All these things could be understood, could be explained. And then I said, sir, maybe we need to get dates. And it was difficult. Though I had some charcoal, we did some test pits. We could not manage at that point of time because of the requirement of funds to do the dates. But then the amount, he encouraged me by saying, don't get this disheartened by it. It is all, you just do all the other analysis. They're more important. Don't think about that dates will give you the final answer. And that is the only achievement you will have, or, should be your objective. And now I find I repeat this to many of my students. It's not just, I know dates are important. I'm also doing dates now, but when it is a situation where, because doing dates is there are constraints. There are constraints with the material, various constraints with the dating, but it is not the end of the tunnel. There are so many other things that you can do and you should do, and you have results. So I think this not just the geoarchaeological aspect, the perspective that he gave us made me so strong that now understanding context, understanding stratigraphy is something which doesn't seem to be like what, and I say that when I started my PhD, that it seemed to be that nothing is in context, and context can be something so demotivating that it will just take you away from your research. You can find context by studying it more, and how you should develop your methodologies depending on your field, and geoarchaeology can come in that way to explain to you or rather solve the puzzles. So I was in contact with him, and the last words, a week before he left, he couldn't talk, and the phone rang. He did pick up, but he just had to very frail, and he said, "Parat kya?" He said, "Just call it call later." And before that, it used to be regular conversations every week or something. You'd ask, "How about the range, Sukanya? Are they coming? What is the range?" And every time the conversations would end by telling me that observe the Brahmaputra. It matters because the drainage is something that will has strong implications, and send me everything that you write. Now, something a teacher makes you feel so important. And the last Guru Purnima, around afternoon, he calls me and tells me, I said, sir, he said, today is Guru Purnima, and it is about, I said, yes, sir, it is I who should call you up. He said, no, it is, my, at this stage, it is also like, we also do it. Our tradition also tells us that we approach our students, or rather, we also acknowledge. And that was so enormous. And I'm still not able to, like after he went, when the news came, I was like, now what will happen? Because for me, I thought I lost an encyclopedia or something which I was holding on to. There were puzzles. I would talk with him and go back to the field and have answers. I still feel it very strongly. I miss him. My phone still has his number, but I know that if I call that number up, it is not the same that will happen. But yes, it's a good feeling that, to talk and discuss. And he also left me with another, in fact, Dr. Arun Kumar, even Hassan from Bangladesh. He said, I would like to have all of you numbers of each other. All of you stay in contact. How much he really also thought, like he told me, so-and-so is sick, was having this sickness, is somebody he has to go. Like, all of us, he would inform. And I realized that he got information about all of us, about health, about family issues. And it was that, something that he also wanted us to continue after him. So I think a few of us are now sharing messages to WhatsApp, a set of connections he wanted us to have, and he has left us with. So that it's really a feeling which gives me immense pleasure to share with you all, and also a pain that somewhere there is a gap, and I really it's sort of a remembrance which I want to make with paying homage to him, at the same time also telling him wherever he is that I will continue my efforts, and we will try to continue the legacy that he left behind with us. Thank you, Shanti.
Thank you so much, Sukanya, for these wonderful words. And in fact, Dr. Razika, who I think she has left the meeting now, but she put in a message saying, dear colleagues, condolences do not revive the deceased, but they maintain trust between those who remain, an African proverb. So your words also echo the same thing. Thank you so much. I would like to request Dr. Jayendra. Jayendra, are you here? Yes.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yeah.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yeah, can you start your video? Can you unmute? And yeah, there you are. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. So, first of all, thank you, Shanti ma'am and Sharma Centre for organizing, first of all, the lecture and now about these reminiscences. So, I think, and I'd like to inform that Professor Sushma Dev has informed me that she is in some function. So, she has some network issues, and so she could not join now.
Okay.
She had attended the lecture, but there are some network issues. So she could not attend it now. So about the reminiscence, because as Shanti ma'am has already told, I am the youngest person, I think, who is be talking about Rajaguru sir for a few minutes and not take much time, because I get very emotional when I hear his name, or even some thoughts come in my mind. I really get emotional, and like words are very short for expressing things. So in a way, I am lucky I'm that only time. So spirit and I think everyone knows about how he was in the field, how he was person, and just a few things that I would like to say that if you see as a academician, he was a next level person without even he would make you feel that you are the greatest person or greatest academician, even if you are like a youngster just doing masters, and he would make you feel that you are already in a great position and you understand things, and he will let you know learn things on your own. And if you don't understand some things, then he will come into the picture and then explain you things, that these things are there and this is how it should be observed, or this is how it should be written. So he was not a teacher like like would spoon feed you. He was a teacher that he will guide you and tell you that you should learn on your own. And somehow as a personal note, he was very worried about me also. When I was doing my masters, we did one fieldwork for my dissertation. Professor Sushma Dev and Rajguru sir, they took me to the field, the famous site of Yadurwadi, where Professor Kale has worked. So they took me to the field. They tried to explain me some things, which certainly, obviously, as a novice, I could not understand many things, but I could observe things. And he explained me in detail what are the things. After coming from the field, also he explained me many things. And then somehow I fell sick. I had a very bad jaundice for about 2 months. I was in the bed. So he was already in his 80s, and still he took efforts to come to my house and meet me personally, and told me that don't worry, it's okay, you are ill, it's okay, we can understand. If it's not possible, just leave the dissertation, take one other paper, and you just complete your MA. Don't waste your time in doing this dissertation. Whatever you had done the fieldwork, we can write some paper or do some other thing. But you just get well soon and then finish your masters, take up a paper. But I also took inspiration from these words, and I took as a challenge that no, sir, I'll complete my dissertation, come what may, I'll get well, become fine, and do the dissertation. I want to do it very badly because I already had interest in going to the field, and geoarchaeology they introduced to me. So I was very lucky enough to come in contact with these people, and somehow I'm became fine and joined the university again and completed my MA dissertation also. Like many of you are knowing that most of the dissertations post his retirement were completed in his shop. So in my case also, my work was done in his shop. We took down some notes, we discussed whatever the things were. And he always encouraged that even if a small problem you have addressed, that is also a major contribution. So he always supported that whatever you write, even a small contribution is very important for our subject. So he was very encouraging in that way since my MA. And then he always continued and supported me that you should pursue PhD in this field, continue in it. And then obviously Shanti ma'am was my examiner and Koresetter sir was also my examiner. So they also are aware about how I continued in that field, and lots of work he supported always. And after my PhD also, he was very worried that you should get a good job. He was always worried. He has told these things to many of my contemporaries also, that Jayendra should get a job, he should be in the field, and he should continue in this field. So unfortunately, when he was alive, I could not get any job because of many things. But surprisingly, in last 2 months ago, I have joined Indira Gandhi National Tribal University as an assistant professor, and he would have been very proud wherever he is in the heaven. He will be very proud about this thing, and his blessings will always be with me. So I tried to inculcate. In last 2 months, I could start teaching, and whatever I have learned from him as a teacher and as a person, I am trying to inculcate those things, continue in the field also, and in the classes also. I try to teach the way he used to teach us, whatever he used to teach us. So I'll try to imbibe him, and I think whatever he has given us, I think nobody will forget for our lives, and even our next generations will also not forget these things. So I just memory that if you, as a person, if you think that not only academician, but as a person, if you remember that what value he has added to our lives. So that is the best value, to stay grounded, remain down to earth, and work hard and give best as you can. So with these words, I like to pay my homage to his memories and always try to follow his footsteps in best capacities of mine. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Jayendra. That was so beautiful and continuing his legacy for the next generation. Professor Arun Kumar, would you please unmute? Yes.
Am I hearable?
Yes, yes.
Good. So I think first of all, thanks to you for your Sharma Heritage for inviting me. So it's a good opportunity, and I always appreciate your efforts and all and your initiatives. I think what we keep on thinking you do before that, and I think what you have done for Dr. Rajaguru is very appreciable. So let me remember um, because I left the college long back in 90 and then shifted to anthropology. My first interaction with him was in 1976. He had come to Chandigarh for some conference, and I had done my MSc just few months before that. So somebody had advised that national figure Dr. Raju is coming, so you meet him. So I met him. I asked for appointment. He says come in the morning for the during breakfast time. I went and I think he saw my dissertation and he says okay. So I will send you forms and all, and I will see when the scholarship is there and all. And so uh, we will process things. So I think in 4 months time I moved to Pune, and the day I reached there, he introduced me to everybody sitting on there. He took me to every room and introduced me to every person. So that was a very good welcome. I remember. And I also remember my first field work with him. So it was in the Nasik, Trimbakeshwar and all we had gone. So first night we were in some hotel and he had a habit of sleeping late. उनको नींद वगैरह कम आती थी तो he says कि if Arunpal, if you are also not feeling sleepy, let us go to the garden. So at 11:30 in the night we went to garden there right near the hotel, and he started a very strange topic. He says, let us discuss today what I do not like in you and what you don't like in me, because we have to be in field many times, so we should know each other and we should adjust to each other's temperaments and all. So it was some very unexpected sort of interaction. And about his field work, I think he used to go field work extensively many times in a year and all. But he always saw that his scholars didn't suffer because of his absence. So he used to leave all the keys of his keys with us and of his Almira's bookshelves, and also many times I think whatever about some if you need something in his absence, so probably he was also leaving blank paper. He was signed on the blank papers and living with us. If you need something in absence, you can do that. So that is something, very big thing of great thing. And he was a real true guru. That means he was not guiding only his students, he was guiding everybody's students. And probably it was probably his first love to be in the field. And not only he visited our field work, he visited the field work of probably all the students of Quaternary studies and priestry, and not till his retirement, but beyond his retirement also he continued that habit. So, and anything happened? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
And again, I think I remember that once he had gone to France for some conference, and when he came, he was giving his impression about this experience, and he says it was a very big get together, and I have not learned anything new. So probably when I get the invitation next time, I will see that my some junior fellow or some student goes. I think so they should also. It's not worth going again. That was again. I think I never heard anybody else saying these sort of words. And his ethics, I think, very strong. He was on that. He says the teacher is also a common man. He is a common citizen, regular citizen before and after the college times. He can go to movies, he can see the pictures, he can go to coffee house, he can do everything which normal citizen does. But catch was that if he does plays with the career of the student, or if he's not honest with this thing, he should be shot in open at Chandrama crossing. He was that strict about that part. If somebody is doing that, so he should not be tolerated. And very extraordinary, he was adjustable. I think we all, his scholars were from different background, different temperaments and all of that. He not only adjusted with all of us, he everybody, all of us were thinking that we are very close to him and all like that. So that was his sort of a way of handling us. So I think everybody was thinking that he's closest to us and all, and he was, I think that was his neck. And whenever I gave him some write-up and all, I think every time he says he started with, even it was a bad write-up, he says, no, it is very good attempt, but following things should be done. So he was giving lot of suggestions, but always starting with a very positive thing. And regarding my PhD, I don't remember much, but then it was a big khichdi that time, in the sense that I did, even the expert had commented that your 150 pages on paleontology, and then 55 pages on the chemistry, and just 19 pages on the archaeology. So that sort of thing. But again, his comment was that each chapter is a claim to the PhD. So that was a very satisfying. I mean, though I took little more time, or quite a time for doing that, but getting that sort of comment from external expert from Russia, that each chapter is a claim to the PhD. So that was, at the end, was okay. And I think, yes, one more thing, that whenever he was attending some conference, etc., even he gets 5 minutes to speak, always he used to say, starting, that it's not my work, it's a combined work of mine and students, and I'm not teaching my student, I'm learning a lot from them. That is really great person. I have not heard any person giving that sort of acknowledgement to the students, to everybody. And I think last thing is that his association, his life journey with the Mulla Mutta River. He used to say, I born in a house located at the bank of the Mulla Mutta. As a child, I played on this soil of the sediments. Professionally, means he is a dissertation of PG or PhD or later projects he did on that. And when in 1971, the at Kharagwasa Dam, water was released. He was doing experiment with the gravels that time, and he was doing till evening. And then he met some neighbors. So they say, Rajaguru, what are you doing there? He says, I'm doing experiment, seeing that with this much release of water, how much gravel moves up, and I'm happy in the experiment. But that fellow said, do it, this is a good thing, but your house is flooded and your parents are sitting on the roof of the thing, so think of them also. So he was that much involved in the academics. Excellent. So I think I've almost completed the thing, but anyway, so, and yes, I got a opportunity to meet him in last 3-4 months of his life also. So I went to Pune, and I think normally they were not allowing anybody, but because I had come from outside to hear out me, and even during that period, he was talking about the research papers he has written, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do all academic things, and I think that even till 2 months or 3 months before this final thing. And but I think such a person you don't come across, and I'm very much impressed by his memories and his personality and my interactions with him. And for me, I don't accept that he's right. He's in my mind. I think there's no day when I don't talk with him, I don't give his examples. So I think I'm very grateful, and I'm very happy that I met such a wonderful person. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. I think we are all united here in gratitude. And that's the key emotion which I feel today. And we have 2 more talks by Professor K. Padayan and Professor Ganju. They cannot be here today, but I will share the screen. And I think Shutranuka, will you read read out the letters?
Yeah, just a second. I'll just read out what Professor Pataya has sent. And I'm reading it as he has given it to us. He says, I'm really happy to know that the Sharma Centre for Heritage Education has thought it appropriate to remember Professor S.N. Rajguru on this occasion of his second death anniversary. My association with him stretches 6 long decades, 1960s to 2020s. He was one of my esteemed teachers for my MA degrees at Deccan College, and I had the honor to join him on the faculty as a junior member in the early 1970s. He was very popular and student-friendly teacher, and together with Dr. G.G. Mazumdar, introduced us to the fundamentals of archaeological sciences. I received wonderful guidance from him about the environmental aspects of my prehistoric studies in Shuapur Doab of the Lower Deccan, which continued for 35 years. He visited the area on several occasions and gave many helpful suggestions for the investigation of the landscape and the sedimentary context of those Stone Age sites of different time periods. His attachment and interest in the geography of the Hunski Benchbal Basin was such that in the very last days of his life, despite all the old age ailments, he prepared a very short but very fine paper about the paleo environment setting of the valley. This is probably his last scientific writing that appeared in Man and Environment. I have no adequate words to thank him for this favor. In fact, his dedication to the promotion of academic interest of his colleagues and students is legendary and without parallels. All this is at the cost of his own work. Professor Rajguru and his family are wonderful hosts, and every student of his would have the privilege of having been invited to their homes for dinner or lunch more than once. This is yet another example of a family feeling tradition of Deccan College set by the great Acharya Professor Sankalia. Like him, Professor Rajguru too was a man of simplicity and modesty and ever inquisitiveness. I must also remember that thanks to his blessing and the best wishes of Professor V.N. Mishra, I succeeded him as Professor of Geoarchaeology, which in turn paved way for my own selection as Joint Director and Intern Director. I visited him a week or 10 days before his death. He started shedding tears the moment he saw me. Obviously, memories of happenings of 60 years had started reeling in his mind. One could only reciprocate with tears when words fail. Thank you. Although Professor Pada is not here with us, but he had sent this beautiful note about him. Thank you so much for patient listening.
Thank you, Shutonuka. We have the next note sent by Professor R.K. Ganju, and he writes, Dear friends, I am extremely grateful to Professor Shanti for the invitation to the event that is organized in memory of the late Professor S.N. Rajguru. My association with Professor Rajguru, popularly known as Guruji, since 1982-1983 has been the most wonderful and sweet experience of teacher and taught. He was my mentor to teach the basics of Quaternary geology, and at a later stage he wanted to learn glaciology from me without any inhibition, something which is unexpected of most scientists. Most of his field observations were translated into indisputable interpretations, speaking of his command on the subject. He was verisimilitude and an unruffled personality. He, as a quaternary geologist, remained the most underrated geoscientist of the country, with no deserving recognition to his commendable field research contributions. I hope the Sharma Centre for Heritage Education will continue to hold the Down Ancient Trails Award and Lecture Series for the times to come to keep the memories and contributions of similar unsung scientists, archaeologists alive and fresh in the mind of youth. Holding of this event, I hope, will motivate other organizations of the country engaged in the promotion and furtherance of prehistory, quaternary geology, geoarchaeology in India to arrange similar such events. Pardon me for not joining you on virtual mode due to some engagement, Professor R.K. Ganju. So with that, we have to culminate and end this meeting today. We thank all of you for being here, Professor Sheila Mishra for her wonderful talk inaugurating this lecture series. We thank Mr. and Mrs. Rajguru and Vaidehi for their presence here. We thank all his colleagues students right up to the youngest student, and various other people who have, perhaps some of you have never met him, for being present and listening to everything here.